Sauer, the Marketing Analyst for the Business Technology Group at Nex-Tech. I will be the moderator today, and just to let everybody know, your line has been muted. And we do invite you to ask questions. However, there's a question box on the right side of your screen that you could type questions into. We will answer any questions you have at the end of the webinar, and we at that time can also unmute your phones, and you will be able to ask us verbal questions as well. Thank you all for joining us, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve Riot, who will get us started.
Great, thank you, Tricia. And I am from Nex-Tech, and I have with me Cody Howland, one of our senior engineers here. Cody, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Cody Howland. I've been here with Nex-Tech a little over 11 years now. I've several different certifications in on my resume, I guess, and we've been doing virtualization now for about, I would say, probably 3, 4, 5 years. Been down several roads with the different versions of virtualization, and can't wait to talk to you guys about it.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Cody. And what I have is a quick agenda here. We're going to talk about what is virtualization. I know that when we sent out this informational teaser on what we're going to do today, a lot of people are like, what exactly is that? So we're going to kind of define what we're talking about today, because there are some different versions of virtualization. And I'm going to help define that a little bit. Then we're going to talk about why you'd want to do this, some of the business reasons behind it, some of the financial reasons. Go over the architecture, what's included in virtualization, and what it looks like. I'm going to bring up some visuals and things, and Cody's going to help us through that. We're going to talk about the product and what you can use to virtualize. There's some free stuff out there, some pay stuff. Cody's going to kind of talk to us about what's included in the free, what's included in the pay, maybe some of the differences. And I think you might be pleasantly surprised. I know I was when I found out that there's a lot of things included in the free part. Some things to consider when virtualizing. I know that Cody's brought some stories to us of, what things to look for when doing it, and maybe how to structure that, and then we'll end with some of the questions. So getting us started talking about what is virtualization. First of all, there are 3 types of virtualization. Talking about server, there's storage virtualization, and desktop virtualization. And today, we're going to strictly talk about server virtualization. And the quick definition, if we were going to do things, oops, Tricia's telling me my screen's not moving forward. Let me fix that here if I can. There we go. So quickly, what we're going to talk about is when we're talking about using virtualization in storage and server virtualization, really what we're talking about is instead of having a physical server for every time you have to deploy a new application or a new server, we're going to get one server and put a whole bunch of servers within it and virtualize them, and they're still going to have their own operating system, they're still going to have their own application server. So they're going to operate as if they were physically separate, but they're just going to be on one appliance. And so today we're going to talk about kind of that piece of the server piece, but you can do that with storage and with desktops, which is kind of a unique piece to that. But Cody, is that kind of what you're seeing when we're talking about server virtualization?
Oh, definitely. I mean, that's the ability to put multiple virtual machines running on one piece of hardware is just it's just unbelievable. It's a wonderful technology. We've been using the heck out of it whenever we can, and we love it. I mean, the ease of use. It just allows us to do so many things, especially with just one server. It lowers cost on hardware, on the hardware side, where we can still get a bunch of servers running on it for applications and use.
All right. So I have a quick picture of it here. Let me see if I can get my screen to advance. Where we're talking about a rack of servers before. That's the picture on the left, and then now we're just talking about one physical server with a little bit of software. And Cody's going to talk to us about that here a little bit later, and then you can kind of see those virtualized servers there, which is the 6 squares on top. But real quickly, we made kind of 5 reasons of why you would want to virtualize, and we're going to start with number 1 here. Is it saves you money. And so I know, Cody, you've seen a lot of times when you've helped customers virtualize. So can you help us understand, clearly we're going to reduce the amount of, physical stuff that we have, but how does that help us save us money?
Right. So typically the big thing is hardware-wise. I mean, that's the biggie right up front. So what we can do is load up one server right up front, and typically we can run anywhere 5, 6, 7, depending on how much hardware we stick in that one server. We can run a bunch of virtual machines on that one server. Which just, to me, that's just a win-win. And then the other, there's several other things as well. I mean, you can the maintenance on them is next to nothing. Actually setting up of the servers, you can create what we call templates. We literally have a server out there. We clone it, so that way we can have another server spun up in minutes instead of hours. Those 3 or 4 things right there. I mean, those are huge as far as the cost savings. So.
And then also, I know one of the things, Cody, is that yeah, we might be putting a little bit larger server in, but with the newer technology, these servers really aren't drawing as much power as even one of the lower power older servers. Is that what you're seeing?
Sure, yeah. The vendors anymore, the manufacturers have got so many good energy savings deals running inside in the BIOS and stuff like that on the servers. That, of course, the less servers you have, the less power you're going to need. So definitely.
Gotcha. And one of the things I remember, just a few years ago, is I'd walk into somebody's, either data closet or just literally a closet that they put the server in, and that thing would be hot and loud. Is it? I mean, I know they're still pretty loud, but is the heat going down? Oh,
yeah, definitely. I mean, it stands to reason that the less servers, be less heat getting put out. Definitely. I mean, it's definitely not a bad thing to get rid of some hardware if you can, in my opinion. So.
Awesome. So number 2 is reducing the administration work on those servers. You kind of touched on that. How exactly are you reducing that administrator work?
The big thing is we're able to centrally manage everything. We're able to do everything from one place. We're able to get servers up and running in minutes instead of hours. Which obviously that saves everybody time and money. And then the other big thing is yeah, I mean, just like the slide says, we're able to, instead of working on the server all the time, we're able to go do other things that might require a little more immediate attention, just because spinning up servers just saves so much time.
Now, I'm not a techie, you know that, Cody, but I've seen some of these interfaces that you're working with, and they're pretty well GUI interface, where it's just kind of point and click. I mean, this is, not only can somebody like yourself that's pretty qualified, but also, some of these administration tasks can be taken care of folks like me. Is that?
Sure, yeah. They kept it really simple. VMware, Citrix, they've done a great job of keeping things simple. It's like you said, it's a nice easy GUI. You right click and do whatever you pretty well need to do. It's very user friendly and very simple.
All right. So number 3, of course, we talked about some of the hardware benefits, and I know, I remember, I've helped customers kind of look at what their servers are currently doing, and a lot of the servers that we deploy are like, at peak, a lot of times they're using 10% of their capacity. And so when you virtualize, you're starting to increase that a lot. So you're actually using what you've bought, right?
Correct. Yeah, I mean, that happens a lot. Even people think, some people believe that some servers are, I just used the heck out of that server. Well, you actually could look at utilization, and you're using very little. You might be using a lot of hard drive space, but as far as performance-wise, you're using very little of the server. So with the virtualization, you're able to do 4, 5, 6 servers, whatever you need to put on it. Of course, you're going to get more bang for your buck out of utilizing the actual hardware itself. So again, another win-win.
And then that works the same. I mean, processing power. I know that just a few years ago we were talking single core. Now we're talking, quad core, 8-core plus multi-core processing. I mean,
definitely.
Even the most basic server anymore probably has more horsepower just out of the box than a server of a year ago. And so that's pretty much what's driven virtualization. Is that right?
I would definitely agree with that. Yeah, you know that, and then the need for it too. I mean, so many people, a lot of the big vendor, you know, the big companies, they only have so much room in their racks, and they need more out of less is what's going on. It's what's really fueling it, and this is, you know, it's finally now starting to trickle down into our realm. You know, the smaller businesses, you know, SMBs, stuff like that. So it's definitely. I think it's definitely being fueled by utilization and cost, you know, and room as far as just pure, I don't have enough room in my rack. So.
Okay. And we talked about processor a little bit, but we can dynamically allocate things like RAM and hard drive too, right?
Yeah, definitely. And they even have some things that you can, you know, you can overuse memory. If you go with the fancy enough version, you can, you know, basically in essence you're double booking your memory. Two virtual servers can use the same chunk of memory, stuff like that. It's really incredible with some of the things they're doing.
And so, you know, being able to dynamically allocate RAM and things like that, RAM's really come down in price. I mean, it's pretty low cost now.
Mm-hmm.
So I could load this thing up and then allocate, I mean, all my different applications could have access to that same RAM pool. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. Correct. Yeah. And like you said, RAM's so inexpensive right now that, you know, back in the days, you know, 2 to 4 gigs of RAM was the norm, and now, you know, you're getting into 70 gig, 100 gig. I mean, servers we're selling now can usually, most of them support up to 196 gigs of RAM. So even if you want to over allocate memory to the servers, you don't really have to, because memory's, you know, like I said, inexpensive enough that it's not as big of a deal. So.
Well, I find that amazing, you know, almost 200 gig of RAM, and I remember when I started in this industry, we won't say how long ago, but a few years ago, you know, I was on like 50 gig hard drives and things like that.
Yep.
Now you get RAM with more than that. Wow. So number 4, you had touched on the fact that it makes software easier to install, and you talked about these pre-made servers. I'm sorry, I'm not using the right term. Tell me more about this way of deploying applications and servers.
Sure. With the software, the actual console software you use, they just make it so simple. It's a wizard you run through. It helps you build the server. You select what operating system you're going to install. You select how much memory, how much hard drive space, how many processors, that type of thing. And then, like I said, typically what we'll do is we'll build one that literally just sits on the server, and we don't spin it, you know, we don't turn it on or anything like that. And so say we have 2 servers running and we need to create another virtual server. The machine I use as a template, I usually label it as a template machine. I'll right click on it and clone it, and it allows me to literally make an identical clone of that server, you know, and typically I'll go through and do Windows updates, stuff like that on the machine beforehand, and then I can right click and clone it, and within minutes, it usually takes, you know, 2 to 5 minutes, and we'll have another server up and running. And then we just prepare it as needed, you know, rename it, join it to the domain, etc. Just makes things so much faster, so much simpler, and it's kind of fun, really.
Yeah, well, I don't know about fun.
Sure, in my world, it's fun.
I call you on that one. Now, one of the things that I've heard that, you know, different manufacturers of software, I guess they're not really manufacturers, developers of software, are now deploying software so that they come in kind of a prepackaged VM. Is that right? So literally you could just take their package and deploy it as a VM and not even have to do anything. Is that right?
Sure, yeah, that happens a lot now. Linux is becoming so popular that a lot of these vendors will have, like it says right on the slide, virtual appliances. You go download these virtual appliances, you attach them to your host server and turn it on, and the next thing you know, you've got a screen up there. A lot of times they'll put you through a little wizard, you know, assign an IP address and whatnot, and next thing you know, you have their software ready to rock, and it doesn't take long. In fact, it takes longer to download it than it does anything else.
Okay. And now, one of the things we haven't really talked about is when we virtualize, my understanding is that in the old, you know, style of, you know, physical servers, you know, I had to install Windows, and I had to install drivers, and I had to make it all hardware-centric, right? And this virtualization eliminates all that, right?
Correct, yeah. They actually load their own They actually load their own drivers instead of using what we've come to know is we have to have this driver, have to have that driver for our video card and for our sound card or whatever, their network card. They actually use their own drivers, which get loaded on the virtual server, and it just makes things so much simpler. We don't have to go track down drivers or anything like that. You just spin the machine up, and there it is. All the drivers preloaded, and everything's ready to go.
Steve, did we lose your audio? If we give you just a second, I'll see if Steve can dial back in.
I'm sorry, I dropped off.
All right. Hey, you're back though. Go for it.
I'm back.
Okay.
Is Cody still on?
I'm still there.
Okay, I'm sorry, Cody.
Nope, you're all
My
right.
phone
Left me hanging.
I apologize with that. So you were explaining to us that basically we kind of eliminated this layer of hardware drivers, and so now it's kind of more software. And so with that, I guess we moved to the next slide. And my understanding is with the slide, with DR and recovery, since we've kind of eliminated that tie between the hardware and the applications, if my server just caught on fire or something, I could literally bring up that backed up image on any piece of hardware, knowing that it's capable of running it, right?
Yeah, basically, yeah. I mean, as long as we have good backup, that's the main thing. But yeah, for the most part, I mean, it's not a big deal anymore to recover virtual machines. What used to take a day or two, now probably takes less than an hour. And that's just huge, in our world. There's just, no time for downtime, as we like to say, and it's just a major benefit. It just makes recovery so simple and so much faster.
Gotcha. And so, I assume that, kind of the old school of backup, if I had some kind of a basic backup image, was I'd back up my files, but when it comes to recovery, I had to still install the drivers, install Windows, install everything, bring the application up to date, then recover my data, which, I mean, what'd that take you, 6 to 8 hours?
Oh, minimum, and depending on the server and how much data. But with the virtualization stuff, everybody's doing image-based backups, which makes things so much faster. You can recover entire machines, in 15-minute increments is what we're going by, maybe 15, 20 minutes, compared to hours, hours and hours, or possibly even a days to recover applications and files. So definitely things are a lot faster.
So it really makes it more capable, and if we do an off-site backup or something, we could really spin people up. We could really spin them up in the cloud, is that right?
Correct, yeah. I mean, that's definitely an option. If we're doing any kind of off-site storage or if there's any kind of off-site replication, since this is a virtual machine, technically we could spin up a machine pretty much anywhere out in the internet, and customers should be able to, the performance will be down just a little bit, but at least you're back up and going, compared to being completely down and not even being able to do anything. So.
Excellent. So architecture, what does this look like, I guess, kind of from a standpoint of putting it together? I know that I have some slides here, and this is a really simplified slide, Cody, where, we're taking some, different types of servers and putting them into one server. Have you seen any servers that we can't do this with? What things should we be looking for? That, I know there's a lot of different servers up there, and you've dealt with a lot of different applications. What things should we be paying attention to when we do this?
The big thing are databases. You want to make sure that your hard drives support. You want to have at least 10 to 15,000 RPM hard drive. That way it can support the throughput that's required for databases. And the other biggie is in IBM, the big boys, the big players, they recommend that you have at least one one non-virtual domain controller. That way, if the perchance your Xen server or VMware server goes down, you at least still have some. You're still keeping your Active Directory structure intact. So that's kind of one thing that they really want you to try to do, is try to keep at least one Active Directory server, physical. And then, like I said, databases is the other biggie. Applications typically aren't a big deal. Email, file, and print, yeah, not a big deal at all. But we do have several virtualized database servers, and they don't seem to be hurting anything. So I don't see it as being that big of a deal. But if you've got a real big database, something to that effect, you want to make sure you have enough hardware. You want to throw enough hardware at it and keep the performance up on it. So.
And I know one of the old school problems was, if I had a 500 gigs worth of open storage, and I needed to, I had reached my limit on that, and I needed more, that, it was a big deal. I had to, change, the way that the hard drive was allocated, and just adding drives wasn't simple. Does this make it more simple if I virtualize that server to add space?
Oh, extremely. Providing that the storage is there, which typically, we'll load the servers up in the front with storage, with enough storage that we think we might meet our needs, plus a little bit of room for growth. And then for the virtual machine, it's really simple. You go in, right-click on the virtual machine, and add more hard drive space to it. I mean, it's a wizard, very simple, and it makes life easy. No getting into the server.
Oh, that's even better.
Yes.
And then, I have this really simple picture here, but really the virtualization stuff is this orange piece here on that slide, right? So it's kind of that layer that's separating our servers, the virtualized servers up there. So what's involved in that orange piece? I mean, what things are going on there?
That's pretty well where everything's being housed. That would be your Xen server, that would be VMware, that would be the Hyper-V architecture, the Hyper-V software. That's basically the heart and soul of the virtualization arena, basically. That's where it's all done at. So that's the main cog in the whole thing.
Okay. And so I guess you've led us into the products piece. You mentioned a bunch of names here, which is Xen, VMware, and Windows Server. And I know there's more than these. I think, you can Google and come up with probably at least a half dozen. But I think these three are kind of the leader. I know as Nex-Tech, we traditionally lead with Xen, which is a Citrix product. Can you tell us why? Can you give us any recommendations, or, is there things that you've seen that are better on some products than others?
Sure.
Strictly from a technical view.
Sure. I've used all three. I have setups of all three. We went with Xen primarily because we're a Citrix partner, which makes support nice and easy for us. But there are some things. The thing I like to say about these is there's 6 of one and half a dozen the other, and it's just same software, different flavor. So Xen Server to me is a little more user-friendly. VMware has a few more advanced features. They go back and forth for those though. So whatever Xen does one day, VMware will do the next day, and whatever VMware does one day, Xen will do the next day. The Windows Server 2008, you get a lot of bang for your buck. You have to buy an enterprise server, and actually have to use enterprise server for that. But you get Hyper-Vs all built in and everything. As far as I know, it's no extra licensing. If you're going to do any failover, any type of thing like that, you do have to set up a cluster, which is kind of a pain, but it's been done. And if I had my preference, I would stick with Xen or VMware. Just seems to be simplified. You're not building on top of Windows already. Xen and VMware typically use a little less resources as far as for the host machine. They'll use a gig or two of memory, and usually will allow them, 1 or 2 gigs of hard drive space for the actual host server. Where Windows Server, you actually build a Windows Server. It actually uses 4 to 6 gigs of RAM, whatever you assign, and then it runs on top of that Windows Server platform already. So, like I said, preferably we like Xen. We do VMware. We'll do Xen. We'll do Server Hyper-V as well. Not a big deal. Preferably we use Xen or VMware.
Okay. Which I guess one of my questions here is price. I know that some of this stuff is free. So, I like free.
Sure.
So what's the deal with the free? I think all of these might have some kind of a free version here. Does free work for a lot of customers? What things do we get with the free versus pay version? What's going on there?
Sure. I would say for probably 90% of our customers, yeah, free will do everything we need. When you start getting in, when you want to start getting some advanced features like some failover, like if you have two host servers running with some shared storage, you can set up failover to where if one host server dies, it automatically goes over to the other server and it continues to run. There's some load balancing stuff that you get when you start buying licenses. It's very nice as far as some of the advanced features. Like I said, you pay for them, but for 90% of our customers, the free version works just fine. Especially if you don't want to buy a SAN for some shared storage. That's the key to it. The whole key to it all is having shared storage if you want to get into advanced features.
Okay, so free really is free in this particular case.
Yeah, they definitely lure you in with that. But if you want to get any advanced features, then you have to buy a license. But licensing for it is actually fairly reasonable. I was actually rather impressed with how reasonable priced it was. But like I said, the key to it is the hardware. If you've got the hardware, you might as well have the licensing is the way I look at it. And if you've got the SAN and you're wanting the advanced features, that's the only way to go.
All right. So I put a list together. I was working with Cody, and some of the things, how do you get started with virtualizing and things? And I made a quick list. Clearly evaluate current server workloads because you kind of need to know what your servers are doing before you can scale to know what you need to virtualize. We were talking about, will virtualization help you out? Does it make sense? I know that, Cody, I think you and I have worked with some customers where, after kind of evaluating workloads, evaluating applications, we just said, it was just smarter to stay where you're at. Is that right?
Yeah, that will happen. We've had that happen a couple times where it just didn't make a whole lot of sense. They needed this and they needed that, and it just didn't make a whole lot of sense to go ahead and virtualize that because it just wasn't necessary. So yeah, we just stuck with physical machines, and sometimes customers request us going for physical machines too. Either way, we'll accommodate either way. It doesn't matter to me. So.
And then I think we've also seen it the other way where customers literally had one server running one application, and virtualization made even sense for that, right?
Sure, yeah. I mean, we've done that. Mainly for the simplification of management. We were able to ease the management or even the backups situation on that as well. It just was going to simplify things for them. They wanted to be able to manage it via that way instead of having to go to the actual server itself. So.
Okay. And then, moving on with my list, I know that we talked about, identifying the software that we were going to use and the hardware, of course, how big of a server, the physical appliance we're going to need to scale. And there's a lot of tools out there, Cody. I know that you've used some of those that will kind of help us work through that, right?
Sure, yeah. In fact, I used one the other day. HP has a sizing tool. They will size your virtual environment for you based on how many users, servers, that type of thing, how many applications. You enter this little thing, you enter that info in a wizard, and it automatically pops up and gives you servers and everything that you need. Very simple.
And of course, one of my biggest concerns would be, so if I was migrating from my physical world today to a virtualized world tomorrow, I mean, we're talking about lots of downtime. How painful is this? What things are going to go on in that process?
Typically, it's pretty simple. Depending on your backups, there are options. So you can do what they call P2V, which is physical to virtual, where you install an application given to you by VMware or whoever, and it basically what it does is it takes a snapshot of the machine and sends it across the network to the host server. There's another option where you can boot to the CD, the install CD for either Zen or VMware, and it will push it across the network. You could also do it to a USB drive, or we use image-based backups whenever we can. We've even had people we just run a backup right before we're ready to virtualize the server, and then we'll shut down the physical server and then do a restore of that server straight on. We'll build a server on the VMware or a Zen server, and do a restore from the backup to it. So there's several options, and it's typically pretty simple.
Okay. And then, so yeah, I mean, and then once you get them moved over, just, kind of learning that administrator piece and, what tools you need to monitor that environment. But those are usually pretty straightforward if I remember right.
Yeah, very simple. I mean, it's not a big deal at all.
Okay. So, good thing is, Cody, we're on pace. We were scheduled to be here for a half an hour. We wanted to take some questions. I know that I kind of want to open it up to people to either type it in. Now, here in a second, Tricia is going to open up the phone line, but looks like I have a couple questions here for you. One of them having to do with software licensing. So the question has to do with, do we have to license all the Microsoft products, even though it's still on one physical server? Do I have to license each virtual server separately? How does that work?
Yeah, licensing on the actual virtual servers on the Microsoft side is the same. That doesn't change. There are some options out there. If you buy Enterprise, you get, what is it, Steve? I think 4 or 5 server licenses with that. So there are some advantages to buying that Enterprise version. But as far as the Microsoft licensing, yes, it's typically the same.
Okay. And I know that, basically Microsoft wants their money and they're going to get it one way or another, right?
Sure, yep.
I got you. So the next question that we had was kind of around hardware. The question really is really the question has to do with, you kind of build one server a little more robust than you would if you just had individual servers. What kind of configurations are you looking for? What things do you usually put in these virtualized servers that you may not always put in a regular server?
Typically, the memory is the biggie. We'll load them up with memory. I'm doing an install right now where we have 2 host servers that are each run the 72 gigs of RAM, and so that way, between the two, there's going to be plenty of room for growth and for future use. The other biggie is hard drives. We've got to have plenty of hard drives available for storage. The setup I'm doing right now has a SAN built-in, or a SAN on the job, that has I think 16 or 18 600 gig drives. So that gives us a total of around 5 to 7 terabytes, something like that. Going to be plenty of storage. That's the biggies: memory and hard drives. The processors anymore are also fast. That we're going to make sure we get something decent in there. So typically there's 2 physical hard drive or 2 physical processors typically in there, and then the processors themselves will have multi-cores in them. So you might have 2 processors in the physical processors in there, but you might end up with 16 cores. It just depends. And then with hyperthreading, it adds even more to that. So yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, 150 gig of RAM and 6 terabytes of hard drive. Is that your normal size? Normally we under that.
No, on a typical small business setup, or what I would, a county setup, something like that, I would think 24 to 32 gigs of RAM would do more than enough. I would venture to guess you can average anywhere from 4 to 8 gigs of RAM per server. So even 16 gigs will probably get you 2 servers on there pretty easy. Maybe even more. Just depends how much memory we want to allocate to each virtual machine. And in hard drive space, anymore. 5 terabytes sounds like a lot, but 1 terabyte isn't a whole lot of space anymore. So space needs are growing every day. So we're trying to make sure we have enough hard drive space available.
Awesome. All right. And so with that, Tricia, I am going to turn this back over to you to let you open up the phone lines to see if we have anything.
Okay, very well. Yeah, if anybody has a question they would like to ask, there's a little raise your hand kind of button, and I can unmute yours directly. And if nobody has any questions, I would just invite you all to, if you have any questions in the future, I guess, about virtualization, you could contact Steve. His contact number is right there at sriot@nextech.com, his email address, or just call our location and we can answer any other questions. Come out to your place of business and help you get situated with it. Again, thank you very much for attending, and we look forward to hearing from you in the future. Thank you.